Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Two's Got Your Ticket. I'm entertainment reporter Vince Gerasoli. There are over 200 theater companies here in Chicago. They perform in massive, ornate auditoriums and tiny storefront spaces. Each contributes to Chicago's cultural vibrancy, and weekly, we spotlight their artistry in a segment that we call Two's Got Your Ticket. This weekend, however, the eyes of the theater world focus on Broadway for the 75th edition of the Tony Awards. The ceremonies will be broadcast live Sunday evening from 7 to 10 p.m. on CBS 2. There is extra reason to celebrate locally. This year, the Tonys will be singling out one of our own Chicago theaters for a special honor. Court Theater will receive the 2022 Regional Theater Tony Award. Court Theater is the professional theater of the University of Chicago, and it's being honored for its continued level of artistic achievement and contributing to the growth of theater nationally. Joining us now to reflect on the honor is Angel Izaguirre. He's Court's executive director. Angel, congratulations once again, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
All right, where were you when you heard about the honor, and what was your reaction?
I was actually at home on the deck in my backyard. Got a phone call with the news. I was thrilled. My husband was working in the backyard, and I screamed and said, "Hey, Court Theater's winning the Regional Tony." And then the person on the other line said, "Oh, we're not supposed to tell anyone for another week."
So you had to keep mum for a while there.
Yes, had to keep mum for a while. Couldn't tell our board members, couldn't tell our staff, but had to start planning.
What difference does an award like this make?
It makes a huge difference. I mean, just on one level, just in terms of morale, it's so great to have this honor for our staff, to have this recognition. We have, like every other theater in Chicago, really hardworking staff. They do incredible work. And so just to get this recognition for them, or for all of us, is fantastic. It also just gets us a lot of other attention. We hope that we can leverage this to build audiences, to raise more money, to attract more artists, more relationships. We hope it can expand our recognition beyond Chicago. It has a lot of different kinds of impacts.
Court Theater is dedicated to classic theater. How does that give us the backstory about its roots? Tell us a little bit more about how it was born and what this dedication to classic theater means.
Yeah, we're of the University of Chicago, a place where classic work is really central to the curriculum. The Court was community theater for a couple of decades before a University of Chicago classics professor who was also an actor, Nick Ruddle, made it into a professional theater company with the same kind of brand of the university. So began to do classic works, classical as in the Greeks, but also classic European work. Over the past 15 years or so, we've really expanded that to include works from the Americas, especially works by African-American playwrights. But we take plays that people have been watching for decades or centuries and present them in a way that hopefully says something really meaningful and deep about the human experience. And in a way that leads to people understanding that work differently.
And I would imagine that's reflected in your current production. It's August Wilson's Two Trains Running.
Absolutely. I think someone told me last night that there's an August Wilson play running somewhere in the world every day of the year. So August Wilson is a stalwart in the American theater. And it's incredible to have an opportunity. This is Two Trains Running is the 9th August Wilson play that Court has produced, and we hope that we bring something new to the ways in which people see that play.
Well, congratulations once again on Angel Izaguirre from Court Theater. Really a big recognition for you winning the Tony Award. And I hope you all enjoy it and can celebrate on Sunday night when the Tonys are officially handed out. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, you at home may not be keeping count, but Court Theater is now the 6th Chicago theater honored by the Tonys with a Regional Theater Award. The others are Steppenwolf Theater, the Goodman Theater, Looking Glass Theater, Chicago Shakespeare Theater, and Victory Gardens Theater. If social media was a thing in his day, Oscar Levant would have been viral. We got a glimpse into his brilliant yet troubled life thanks to Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Doug Wright as the Goodman Theater presented Good Night, Oscar. Levant was an enormously popular musician and comedian in the 50s and 60s. He's brought to life by actor Sean Hayes from Will and Grace. Goodnight Oscar examines 4 hours in his life when Levant was released from a mental ward to guest star on Jack Parr's Tonight Show.
Who was Oscar Levant?
It's a great question, and it's true that he's fallen off our pop culture radar. But Oscar was many things. He started as a protege and best friend to George Gershwin. He became a composer and concert pianist. Found his way into colorful bit parts in movies like The Barclays of Broadway and An American in Paris.
Disappear, don't you see I'm busy?
And made the wisecracking piano player a famous staple of those films.
Show me your blah, 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 blah.
And finally, in the 50s and early 60s, he became a wag on TV talk shows and game shows.
And what do you do for exercise? I stumble and then I fall into a coma.
What is it about Oscar Levant that makes him such a good central character?
Oscar is fascinating because he really redefined the way we think about American humor. He was bedeviled by several mental illnesses and used them as fodder for his comedy.
Well, we have a bunch of pills here. We honestly, we know we got everything. I took them. They're nothing.
But at the same time, it was progressive in as much as it helped to remove some of the stigma that surrounds those conditions. But I tried to include some of those choice witticisms for which he's so famous.
Was there one you discovered that you weren't aware of that just sticks with you now?
Oh, so many. I mean, I'm reluctant to give away anything in the play, but one thing he said that always amuses me, if you're a fan of 50s movies, he was famous for saying, I knew Doris Day before she was a virgin.
In addition to this brilliant piece, Wright's impressive credits include the 2004 Pulitzer Prize for I Am My Own Wife. We heard from a Pulitzer Prize winner and now a promising young playwright from Northwestern University. At Rivendell Theater this past spring, she examined the opioid crisis and challenged the stereotypes that dehumanize its victims. We know the headlines. Stories of doctors blindly churning out opioid prescriptions that lead to some 70,000 fatal overdoses a year. In Spey, playwright Madison Fiedler examines the impact on two West Virginia sisters, one raising her sister's child, the other coping with addiction. Programs to sterilize drug users influence the storyline.
The title in particular has special significance.
It comes from this quotation by the founder of this organization that is founded in my home state, North Carolina. Quote, "We don't allow dogs to breed. We spay them. We neuter them. We try to keep them from having unwanted puppies, and yet these women are literally having litters of children." I mean, it's horrifying and I think so exemplary of the ways in which people who use drugs and suffer from substance use disorder are dehumanized.
Madison, what led you to this subject matter in the first place?
Yeah, so I grew up in Appalachia. I felt a lot of dissatisfaction with the way that the region gets depicted and oversimplified. I want to tell stories that unsettle people's preconceptions and complicate the narratives of what it is to be from and of that part of the country.
How did you encounter the subject matter while you were growing up in the area? Did you see evidence of it?
Everyone knows someone who's been impacted by it, and it is sort of the thing that you talk around, and something that you see show up in the papers, but doesn't get, like talked about at the dinner table. I think addiction can be talked about as this like matter of individual choices that lead to an inevitable conclusion, but really it's just such that the circumstances in the region are such that there are not always a lot of individual choices to be made. Corporations like Purdue Pharma can benefit financially massively from flooding small and rural towns with opioids, and that's not how it gets talked about on the ground level. And I wanted to start some of those conversations.
And Fiedler's impressive work will have you talking. Fiedler graduated from Northwestern University just 3 short years ago. Coming up, a look at the emotions behind the first big show to open in Chicago after lockdown. And Shakespeare shows his roots in one of his lesser-known works. The theater world globally spent nearly 2 years on hiatus during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But by last fall, curtains began to rise again, and so did spirits. Take, for example, the excitement surrounding the revival of the 25th anniversary tour of Rent last fall.
Can you walk me through Seasons of Love, what it feels like as a performer?
It's one of the greatest songs to ever be written in a musical theater canon. Seasons of love. Seasons of... From the very first chord of that song, you just kind of get chills down your body because you know what this song means to so many people.
25,600 minutes, 525,000 journeys to play.
People will be roaring as the intro is playing and everyone's coming onto the stage and we're about to sing, but we get to really be ourselves and connect to the audience.
You see people's faces as we're singing this song, and it just, the words and the lyrics of everything that we're saying, really, you can just see that it's touching people's lives.
I'm excited to hear anything in the theater again right now.
Eileen Lucario is Vice President of Broadway in Chicago.
I mean, October 5th could not come soon enough.
What's it feel like in this moment?
I want to say joyous, but it's not quite there yet. I think the stakes are high for all of us. We changed our ventilation systems in all our theaters. We have touchless bathrooms, touchless ticketing. Even your playbill can be reached online.
I have been reading some reports, though, out of New York, and the ticket sales are just a little bit less than they had hoped for.
I don't think that we're going to just immediately turn over and be sold out, have sold out shows. We are going to stay open, and we are going to have an extraordinary experience together in the theater again.
For those who don't know, Rent is loosely based on the opera La Bohème by Giacomo Puccini. You know, I couldn't let that Italian reference pass. Elsewhere in theater, you may not have read this dark comedy in high school English class, but Chicago Shakespeare Theater this season gave us an idea of what we're missing. All's Well That Ends Well is one of William Shakespeare's lesser performed works. For the characters, who span the social spectrum, director Shauna Cooper has created an Edwardian bohemian world where choreographed movements help punctuate some of the storyline. We spoke to her.
All's Well That Ends Well tends to be one of the lesser performed works of William Shakespeare. Why is that?
I feel like in All's Well That Ends Well, you can feel a playwright experimenting. It's actually what I love about it.
His face I know not, whatsoe'er he is, he's bravely taken here.
And you can feel Shakespeare experimenting with so many conventions, so many characters, plot points, all sorts of things that he goes on to do in later plays. So it's sort of like his greatest hits, but it's just kernels of them.
What challenges, though, does that present to you?
I suppose you could say it's a challenge, but I love this about it. You're flying blind a little bit. It feels like you're doing a new play. I think this might be the first Shakespeare play I've worked on where no one in the room had done the play before.
My high school English teacher will hate me for asking the question this way, but can you give me the Cliff Notes version of the plot?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to hate you for this question.
I love your son.
I mean, I think All's Well That Ends Well is basically about a girl who loves a boy who doesn't love her back. And she goes to the ends of the earth along with some questionable tactics to try to change that. We're also working with this incredible Chicago-based choreographer, Stephanie Martinez, who's created a really unique movement vocabulary for the soldiers, who are the young men in the play, not really going off to war so much as war as like a finishing school for young men.
Did you discover any unexpected delights while you were approaching this production?
If you're lucky, this happens when you're working on Shakespeare, is how much it feels like the moment we're in. And it's been spiritually really moving and satisfying to work on a play that is about emerging from a time of grief and mourning and loss and figuring out how to live again.
Out in the suburbs this season, you can find out what's new Buenos Aires with a ticket to Drury Lane Theater's production of Evita. The Lloyd Webber musical examines the polarizing figure of Eva Perón, the First Lady of Argentina in the 1940s, known for both her philanthropy and greed. At the helm is director Marcia Milgram Dodge. She comes to the Drury Lane fresh from a Metro DC production of Beauty and the Beast. It featured a talented and unconventional cast and made headlines globally.
You recently directed a production of Beauty and the Beast that received national attention. Was that something you were expecting?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. The amount of attention and the far-reaching attention was mind-blowing.
Is this home? Am I here for a day or forever?
Why do you think it received so much attention?
Well, we were breaking down barriers. We were groundbreaking. Our Belle was a plus-size queer Black woman, and our production made it accessible to all shapes, sizes, colors, ethnicities, abilities to say, I can be a Disney princess.
Let's talk about Evita right now.
Okay.
So Evita has a charismatic lead character. It has a groundbreaking score. So as a director, where do you start?
You start with the text and the music, and you shut out anything that you've seen before or imagined. Being a mother has really impacted my choices. What happened to poor little Ava Duarte? The biography of this woman, it is tragic. The poor peasant, lower class, shirtless ones, they became her followers and her cult, really. You put your name on this ticket, you were going to be picked and you would become wealthy. And meanwhile, she's skimming off the top and wearing her Dior gowns and drinking champagne with her dictator husband.
So in the end, was Evita manipulative or was she altruistic?
She was totally using them for power. This is a woman who became a saint at 33 years old. She burned fast and bright and hot and ferocious and then died. She just went for it.
Okay, don't cry for me, because I was already lucky enough to see Evita. Still ahead, an unlikely romance is sewn together at Northlight Theater. And you don't have to travel to New York to see one of this year's leading contenders for Best Musical at the Tonys. A visit now with another accomplished suburban theater, Northlight. In its recent production, Intimate Apparel, it is 1905, and the talents of a Black seamstress help her sew her way out of poverty. Along the way, she forms an unlikely connection with a Jewish fabric merchant. It's the work of playwright Lynn Nottage. We spoke with director Tasia A. Jones about its themes.
What intrigued you most about this production?
This play in particular is one that I just felt really connected to. For me, it's about honoring those that came before me. And so I have a really strong connection to my family and my family history.
What are the themes explored in Intimate Apparel?
I think it's really about connection. It's a lot about dreams deferred. All of the characters in the play have something that they want or desire, but they've sort of put off to the side. Esther Mills, our main character in the play, is really the only one who's still pursuing those dreams. And she has sort of this infectious quality, right? That her desire and hope kind of spreads to the other characters in the play.
What sort of message does it have for a modern audience?
I mean, certainly connection, right? We've been sort of missing that the last couple of years.
Were your eyes open to anything in your own life because of taking on the material?
Yeah, really, it made me think about my grandparents and all that they had to go through to make a way in this country. My family is from the Caribbean. My grandparents came from Jamaica. And my grandfather brought over his 11 children and his wife from Jamaica. And it was really difficult, right? They really struggled. And this play is about those struggles, the struggles of coming to a new country for one of the characters, and the struggles of being Black in America, frankly. So it really hit home for sure.
The history books may have presented them as little more than shadows of their much-married husband, King Henry VIII of England. But in 6, they shine.
Listen up, let me tell you a story.
In a modern-day concert, the wives, who were beheaded or divorced, are center stage in an evening of female empowerment. Olivier-nominated choreographer Carrie-Anne Henry is responsible for the evening's hip-hop exuberance.
When you were first approached for this project, how did it sit with you? What did you think?
I didn't know what to think initially. And I was like, this is so incredible. It's so rare that I get to work on something that is predominantly female orientated. And just the way that the stories were written and the music was written and the idea of it being enveloped in this pop concert, I was like, this is literally all of my dreams come true.
You've spent a good portion of your career in a genre that's called narrative hip hop. Explain that for folks who might not realize what it is.
Yeah, so over in the UK, we have quite a strong hip hop theatre circuit. And basically, we would normally take quite well known stories and end up giving them a little bit of a hip hop twist. So, for example, Into the Woods, we turned that into the Hoods. All of the dance used was, hip hop and street dance styles.
As a Brit, what's it like bringing the stories of the 6 wives of Henry VIII to the stage and telling them in this way?
It's just amazing. I mean, when I was at school, I really didn't learn about these wives. So to hear about these women's lives was incredible. And especially, I feel so proud at the end when we get Catherine Parr speaking about, the fact that she was a writer, the fact that she campaigned for female education, the fact that she, got like a woman to paint her picture, which we state in the show, all these things that just weren't done at that time. And I just think how incredible it was to have people thinking that kind of like forward ahead and thinking at that time, like, hang on, why aren't women getting the same voice as men here? So if anything, it was a history lesson for me, and I got to wrap it up in some really funky music.
6 is playing through July 3rd at the CIBC Theater. Also, the Broadway production is up for 8 Tonys, including Best Musical. Dealing with racism in 1930s America, the novel To Kill a Mockingbird won the Pulitzer Prize and was adapted into an Academy Award-winning film.
Don't you remember me, Mr. Cunningham? I'm Jean Louise Finch.
The current stage production features Mary Badham, who originated the role of Scout in the film. This time around, she's playing the bigoted and drug-addicted Mrs. DuBose. We spoke with Badham about her connection to the classic.
When you were working on the film, did you realize that you were working on something special?
No, I was just a little kid. I had no clue. It wasn't until years later that I realized how important this was.
What were the bits and pieces that filtered in and the light bulb went off and you realized it really was something special?
It's a piece that's very current. Though it was a long time ago, we still are dealing with all these same problems.
I don't want to say that you took Hollywood by storm, but you kind of sort of did.
Cecil Jacobs did. That's why I had to fight it.
You were nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. And then you kind of sort of stepped away.
The film industry had changed a lot. For children, that was especially so. And there was a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll going on. I just didn't understand all that. I didn't want any parts of it, and I left.
Then you get the call to join this production. What was that like? And was it easy saying yes?
No, it was not easy saying yes. It took a long time for me to come around to this. I've never done theater. I don't know anything about theater. It's a difficult role. I have to play somebody that I know nothing about. She's not a pleasant person at all.
You're kind of like a piece of Americana. This film is shown in just about every school in the United States to just about every student. To be a part of something like that must be just wonderful.
Wonderful in a way, but in another way, it's a big responsibility to hold true to the message and to connect it to now and why it's important. That's a big job.
I can still remember watching Badham when I saw that film for the first time when I was just a kid. Badham says that right now, her favorite role is grandmother. Sometimes things can get lost in translation, or they can take on a new meaning.
Case in point, Seagull, now being mounted at Steppenwolf Theater. The Anton Chekhov classic is still tackling themes from what is love to the meaning of art, but this time with more modern phraseology. We spoke with Yasin Payankov, who adapted, translated, and directed the piece.
What keeps us returning again and again to this source material?
I think it's the humanity of it. There are 3 main themes in Chekhov's plays: the theme of art, the theme of love, and that nagging feeling of time passing by. We have all been in love at some point in our lives. We have all wanted things really badly. We have all have been disappointed. So that's what it makes it so it's timeless to me.
It was written originally in Russian. How over the years does a translation take on the nuances of modern times?
My translation of it, I was really kind of hearing the voices and how would those people speak those words today in America.
We often think of The Seagull as a very serious piece, but that isn't what the original intent was it?
No. Chekhov wrote it as a comedy. And it's supposed to be very funny. And I think our production is funny. And I really hope that the audience laughs a lot, because it's really a comedy of the human spirit. You have everybody is in love with the wrong person. Everybody chases the wrong person. Those characters don't hold back. They really tell you what they want. And sometimes they say it in the most direct and sometimes probably most inappropriate way. And I think that's what makes it really funny and very relevant, you know?
This production of Seagull is being mounted in Steppenwolf's Ensemble Theater, which is the heart of its new Arts and Education Center. It's playing through June 12. Next, how two young actors are on guard in an impressive production at Writers Theater. And a Chicago software engineer defies gravity as the lead in Wicked. There is a coming-of-age piece on stage in Glencoe right now, and it also gives you a front row seat to some polished athleticism.
The actors on stage are actually fencing. Athena, now playing at Writers Theater, examines the moments in a teenager's life when we discover who we're about to become. The young women on stage were agile actors, but fencing novices when cast. We spoke with director Jessica Fish about their transformation.
Fencing is not necessarily a female-dominated sport, but it's a big part of the narrative. What's the storyline? How does fencing play a role in the story?
It's a two-person show. Athena and Mary Wallace have met at a regional competition. They've never met each other, and they meet as competitors on the fencing piece.
We're gonna constantly come up against each other. Maybe. Definitely.
And I won't spoil anything for you, but telling you that Athena wins this first matchup. And that sort of launches this unlikely friendship. They're very much opposites, and they become sparring partners, and over time they become friends, ?
There's a lot of fencing choreography involved with the production. Did you bring in choreographers to help them learn the skills, or did you have to learn the skills yourself?
Yeah, it was a tall order. Neither of our actors are fencers, but they have been training with the Lincoln Square Fencing Club since January. They're actually on electrified reels, and they are really fencing. And so we had the real fencing coach who kept us honest and made sure that we followed the rules of fencing. And then we had our theatrical fight choreographers who made sure that we made it theatrical and exciting, and that the actors could repeat it as much as possible. But it's live and it's different every night.
But the fact that they're actually fencing, all of that must add to the excitement for an audience, don't you think?
Yes, it's excitement for the audience and terror for a director, because, you know, as a director, we want the show to be the same every night. But theater is very live. It's not Netflix. And it is not the same every night.
And that element of surprise is what keeps the audience on guard. Okay, thank you for letting me tell a dad joke there. Athena is playing at Writers Theater through July 10. It has been called brilliant and breathtaking, and it's being staged once again by the Looking Glass Theater Company.
Looking Glass Alice follows the fantastical adventures of author Lewis Carroll's heroine. However, in this wonderland, the circus arts surround the audience and bring the story to life. We spoke with adapter and director David Catlin.
Looking Glass Alice has become sort of a signature piece for Looking Glass Theater. Did you ever imagine when you first put it together that it would have this kind of staying power?
No, not at all. I mean, we loved making it, and each time we return to it, we get to kind of remake it a little bit. We wanted to make it for that moment in time and for who we were, and because we were true to that, and just making something that we thought was beautiful and celebrated all the wonderful nonsense of Lewis Carroll. I think that's what allowed it to bloom into something that we get to return to again and again.
For those who may have never seen Looking Glass Alice, there are elements of circus arts that are woven through the narrative. How did you know that the characters from Alice's world would lend themselves to this kind of production?
Well, one of the underlying themes of the story is believing in impossible things. There's something about the circus that celebrates the impossible. We're pushing the envelope of what human beings can do.
It's been about 7 years from what I've read since you've last staged Looking Glass Alice. Why was now the right time to bring it back?
This show, at its core, at its beating heart, celebrates being together. Nonsense and silliness and whimsy. And I feel like now more than ever, and even more than I think we expected, it is something that I think we all need and want and can celebrate.
Take my word for it, you're going to want to fall down this rabbit hole again and again. Looking Glass Alice is recommended for audiences 5 and up, and it's playing at the Looking Glass Theater through July 31st. The soundtrack of our lives echoed through the Mercury Theater's production of Women of Soul, paying tribute to some spectacular voices and their backstories.
Aretha Franklin definitely was one, and you can put others like Diana Ross and Dionne Warwick on that list too. But Women of Soul, playing at the Mercury Theater Chicago, also reveals what it took for these powerhouse performers to succeed in a male-dominated industry. We spoke with writer-director Darrell Brooks.
Donna Summer, Gladys Knight, Dionne Warwick. Were you worried about leaving someone out?
Absolutely, absolutely. They are some of my favorite artists.
Darrell, ultimately, what's the message you hope to get across?
These women paved the way and they deserve to be respected. And this just scratches the surface. People don't know just what they had to go through to get to where they were. It wasn't as easy for them as it was for a lot of their male counterparts.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog. When snooping around the door.
We look at Big Mama Thornton. You know what I mean? People today probably don't know who Big Mama Thornton is. But they don't know that's where Hound Dog came from.
Well, when
Mahalia Jackson, they were trying to force her to sing secular music so she could be more popular. And she said, no, I don't have to.
How did it feel as a band to tell the story of so many women?
Thinking about it, even for me writing this show, I had to ask a lot of people, was it okay if I wrote it?
Okay, you're dressed as Donna Summer, but you bring a whole list of heavy hitters to life. Is there one that speaks to you more than the others?
Oh, goodness. Everyone speaks to me in different ways.
We had a chance to speak with Darrell, the writer and the director, and he said he was very appreciative of the rapport he had with each and every one of the actresses because you helped him keep the script, keep the production real.
I thought it was a very realistic process. What I enjoyed about working with Darrell on this show is allowing the women to speak and be heard, which isn't always the case working a lot in this industry.
And that is what I try to push in the show. It's not just how they sang, but how they live their lives that makes them women of soul.
I just love this next story. One day you're developing software, and the next day you're starring in a Broadway show. That is a spellbinding moment from the life of Carla Stickler.
She had been with the Broadway hit Wicked years ago, but left it for a career in tech. However, a shortage of Elphibos over the holidays had her once again taking flight as Oz's Wicked Witch.
That just makes me laugh that, your side hustle for a couple of weeks was starring in a major Broadway production.
Yeah, hobbies.
When I meet the wizard, once I prove my worth.
Really, the $64,000 question in all of this is, how did this come to pass?
I love that people want to like to think that I was some random person they called after 7 years because everybody was sick and the world was ending. But at the end of the day, I have been with the show since 2010. I was a standby and an understudy in the company full-time until 2015. Over the course of my career as an actor with Wicked, I have driven out to Philly to cover the tour on a whim one afternoon because they didn't have an Elphaba. I've flown out to LA for a couple weeks to cover. I had kind of made peace with the fact that I may never play Elphaba again. A lot of times the main reason my job exists is just for the comfort of everyone in the building to know that there is another Elphaba around, just in case.
Did the blocking just come back to you naturally?
There's this thing when you're an understudy where part of learning the role is really memorizing your paths on stage, right? As you relearn the role, those things all come back.
During the performance, did you have any butterflies?
As someone who was a professional understudy for so long, I thrive off of this crazy adrenaline rush of doing something that I don't really know what I'm doing in front of thousands of people. So I was so excited to be there. Instead of being nervous, I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to get to do this probably ever again. So let's just enjoy the ride.
Stickler clicked her heels together 3 times and is now back here in Chicago. Hers is just a number of stories about understudies stepping into the spotlight, but boy, was hers magical. And with that, the curtain comes down on this special Tony edition of Two's Got Your Ticket. I hope you enjoyed meeting the people behind some of Chicago's best received productions of the past few months. And theater lovers, don't forget, you can watch the Tony Awards from 7 to 10 p.m. Sunday night on CBS 2. And remember, each week, Two's Got Your Ticket to the best in live performances. I'm Vince Girasoli, and thank you very much for joining us.